Hi everyone, thank you so much for being there with us. We will speak a public event on how to foster digital identity in Europe, organized by the Center for Data Innovation. So we are in think tank working on data-related issues, including the digital identity framework, which is a big piece of regulation in Europe right now. So before we start, I would like to make a disclaimer here because normally we should be 4 speakers, and unfortunately, 3 of them had to drop this morning. So Stefan Mule from Eurostart cannot participate, and there will be no replacement. MEP Romana Jerkovics cannot participate, and there is no replacement. And Madis AS2 from the European Commission cannot participate, but there will be replacement, which Ronnie can. Ronnie, thank you for participation here, which is a second national expert from Norway at the European Commission here. So also another disclaimer here, you can participate and ask questions here because it's an interactive public event via Slido. So you have the link. Please don't hesitate to ask question to speaker or to me, and we'll be happy to answer them at the end of the participation here. So the public event will be as follows. The first in 3 parts. The first part will be on digital identity and the state of play in Europe. The second part will be on the EU digital identity framework. And the third one will be on the digital identity framework in Europe and abroad. So the main 3 issues when we have to speak about digital identity here. So let's start with the first part to know a little bit more about digital identity, because for some of them, digital identity is just a name or another name, and but it's much more than just name and username here. So I will ask first to Stan Sticker P from Estonia. To give just a state of play of digital identity in Europe. What is digital identity? What digital identity matter? And everything you need to know about digital identity. Thank you so much for your time, Stan.
Yes, hello, Christoph. Hello, Ronnie. Hello to everyone listening. Thanks for having me. Just to begin the state of play, I think how to characterize it the best, let's say the best way to characterize it would be it's very uneven. If you look at the eIDAS regulation today, if you look at the notified eIDs systems that we have in Europe today, we see that there are not too many of them around. If I'm correct, the number is 14. So that means that we have literally tens of millions of Europeans today, everywhere around the member states, who basically don't have an access to the digital single market and the services provided on it in a way that we would like them to. But what is happening, and what I mean by things being a bit uneven, is the fact that there are some member states which have quite successfully managed to set up e-governance, public services, online public services, and national means of electronic identification, which are enjoying a pretty good uptake in the whole population. And Estonia is one of those states, and there are more in Europe, of course. And what I think is going to be the next big challenge for Europe, let's say in the coming years, the next 3 to 5 years, is going to be the question of how are we going to able to connect those cells, those separate cells of the digital single market, and make them connect to each other and actually create a digital union. And that is basically, in my understanding, the main question that the new eIDAS regulation is trying to solve. And how, yeah, sorry.
But basically, what is digital identity? Why digital identity matter in Europe? What can we do with digital identity? Because for non-knowledgeable speaker or audiences, digital identity is just a card with my name, my age, where I'm living, but we can do much more. So what we can do and why digital identity matter before this next big things of trying to make them interoperable and so on.
Right. So to put it very simply, yeah, you can have your digital identity can be this, ID card, but it can also be a mobile application, and it can even be a wallet, as the new eIDAS regulation proposal sets forth. It can be a mobile application that can help you in very different use cases in the public sector. From doing your taxes to renting a bike in Brussels, for example. The use cases are in the tens of thousands at least. But to put it very simply, why it matters, it may sound robust, but doing these things digitally is just much cheaper, much more convenient, and much quicker. It's pretty easy to understand that when we think about the private sector and private sector services. For example, today, if you want to send one of your friends a message and you want them to receive it instantly, you basically go on WhatsApp or you go on Facebook and send them a message. But imagine if you had to go buy an envelope, buy a stamp, attach the stamp to the envelope, write a letter, post the letter, then the mailman will deliver it, and perhaps in a matter of weeks the letter will reach your friend wherever he or she lives. We don't do that anymore. We use digital alternatives, and that should be the same way in the public sector, in public services. But for some reason, in public services, often we haven't gotten the point of that yet. But in the private sector, in our everyday lives, we use those benefits that digital identities and services offer us every day. And your Facebook account, for example, is also a type of digital identity. It's unregulated and different from national identities, but it's still a digital identity. And yeah, basically that's what I wanted to say. Yeah.
Ronnie, you can complete which view from Norway. You are a national expert of Norway. I know in Norway you have also digital identity here. And what is the state of play in Norway?
So the state of play in Norway is that we have a broadly deployed electronic identity, which is basically being used for all kind of services, public and private, and everybody has it and everybody is using it. So inside the country, we have kind of solved the problem of digital identities, but it stops by the border, right? So this is an important aspect of the regulation, that this is a cross-border thing. It's also supposed to work in other countries and not within your own country.
So a Norwegian can use it, his digital ID, I don't know, perhaps in Sweden or in Estonia?
Or in Germany or in France or in Greece. So that's the idea about this new regulation, that we are going to have a harmonized way of doing it.
Yeah.
So just like your passport or your national identity card, you can use that all over Europe. And the same should apply for a digital identity also.
Interesting. And do you have a figure about the number of user or customers in Norway thanks to digital ID?
So yes, I have, but I haven't done them readily at the moment. But there are several billions saved, as estimated by the government. So it's quite a huge impact. So doing digitalization saves you perhaps as much as 30 euros for each transaction for the most expensive transactions. So it's really a huge saving that can be done by digitalization.
So small things for huge saving. This is amazing things. It is the same in Estonia, Stan, because I know that Estonia is one of the leading country in digital identity, and nearly everyone has a digital identity here.
That's correct. I very much agree with what Ronnie said. So much so that For example, in the late 90s and in the beginning of the 2000s, we were, as a country, basically in a situation where we didn't have enough funds to build a physical infrastructure to offer public services on a level that we wanted to. So basically, the only possible alternative was to do it digitally. And little did we know what that will develop into. Little did we know that electronic identities and e-governance are going to be such a big thing. But at that time, that was the only way for us. And very simply put, because it was a lot more cost efficient.
So yeah, I'm from France, and we are still with the old way of thinking. We have a small card, which it's very complicated to put it in my pocket. We don't have a digital identity, and if you see my license, driving license, it's 3 papers basically, whereas you can have all these digitally. So what is interesting is that we have 3 different experiences, France, a little bit away, but we try to do the best. Estonia, you unlock the things because it was too complicated to do it. So you decided, say, okay, let's use digital here. And in Norway, you have another experience. So as a question is, why different member states have different state of play here, and why, for example, Estonia don't spread its experiences to the other country?
Actually, to start with the second part of your question, we do. We have both governmental and non-governmental bodies that are basically focused on sharing that experience, and not only telling our story, but also bringing other stories and experiences home, so that we could develop our own ecosystem. Because in no way are we living under an impression that our eID system or e-governance system is ready or finished. No, it's in fact just the beginning of this field. Yeah, and sorry, and the first part of your question was, could you repeat that?
The first part was basically that we have three different countries with different state of play, and we are not at the same speed. We are still with a paper. Basically, we are not fully digital. You are fully digital, and with 3 different ways. You can even use your digital identity on mobile. I think this is the same in Norway, and in Sweden you can have digital identity with a bank ID, which is not the case in Europe still. So you mentioned that we are just at the beginning. I'm thinking about a citation from Churchill. This is not the end. This is the beginning of the end, and so on. So, what is the beginning here? What we can do in the future with a digital identity? Rennie, you can.
Yeah, so I think what you can do with a digital identity is fairly limited. You can prove who you are. And what we are doing now is that we're going far beyond digital identities. We are entering the waters of what's called digital validation, where you can prove anything. You can prove what kind of education you have. You could prove who you're married to. You can prove how many children you have. You could prove that you have a driver's license. And that's the reason why we are doing this in a wallet and not just another identity mean. So the next frontier is validation, digital validation, which goes to validate all kinds of other stuff beyond your identity. And that would bring a huge benefit.
So, for example, in France, if I want to go to a restaurant, I have to prove that I have my COVID certificate, that I'm vaccinated, or I have a negative PCR test of positive one.
Yeah.
And I have just to show a QR code. Is it a kind of digital identity here?
So it's not a digital identity, but it's something you can have in your wallet. And it's connected to your digital identity. But you may not have to disclose your identity to prove your vaccination status. So this is, again, the validation to validate things that go far beyond your identity and might not even be directly connected to your identity. As you know from the COVID passes, they are kind of disconnected from your identity by purpose for privacy reasons. So this is the territory we are entering, and as I said, this could provide an enormous value for any business in Europe, not only those in the identity sphere.
Okay, and so let's move on to the EU digital identity framework here, because we spoke a little bit about the use and value of digital identity here. And so for the agencies, the digital identity framework has been introduced this year by the European Commission, and two things important here to disclose. The first one is the European Commission wants that an interoperable framework that is working within the 27 member states. First of all, so namely that if you are in France or in Spain, you will be able to use your digital identity in another country in Europe. So basically, the framework broadened the current regulation about digital identity, which is the eIDAS directive regulation. I'm sorry. And the second thing is that the framework aimed to implement a digital identity wallet here. So like Ronnie said, where you can connect attributes to your identity, and you will be able to display this attribute to a private or a public entity. So for example, if tomorrow you want to go to a bar in some member state, you have to prove your age. So you will be able only to show that you are over 18 to enter in a bar. And like that, you will not be, there is no need to disclose that your name is, you come from X country, or you are living in this country here. So at the end of the day, it's faster and it's more private than the current state of play, where you have to show only your ID. So perhaps Stan, after this short introduction, I know the digital identity framework is much bigger than what I'm saying right now, but what are the concerns that the EU digital identity framework aim to address here? So basically, the underlying question is, why do we need EU digital identity?
Right. So why do we need, or perhaps when we focus on that new wallet solution, well, it has actually already been said here why we need it. We had these types of solutions coming ever since the GDPR entered into force. It was since then evident that those days where you have to, for example, prove your age or something, and you along with your age you pass your name, date of birth, perhaps the municipality you live in, all that data in the hands of service provider, those days are counted, and that's what we're doing right now. But I actually agree with Ronnie that digital identity in itself is merely your identity, and it doesn't necessarily come with the service behind it. That's actually one of the weaknesses that we're seeing with the current eIDAS regulation, is some interoperability problems where you can, for example, log onto another member state's service, for example, the population registry, with your Estonian ID card, because the registry has to approve of that under eIDAS, but you cannot actually use any service behind it. And that's a very common problem in Europe. You basically get through the facade, but you cannot use the service behind it, because the state information system of the receiving country isn't interoperable with your attributes or with the state information system of your home country. And that's actually something that's going to be I don't know if a challenge, but an important question anyway for Estonia as well, when the new wallet conception enters the playing field, because the new wallet conception basically sets forth that people will be walking around with these apps on their phones, and these let's say credentials or documents, for example, university diplomas, driver's licenses, and such, will be held basically in their phones, in their wallets. They may have downloaded them before, and so that evidence, for example, is going to be stored there. That is basically going to be a difficult question for us, because currently our state information system is built in a way that people don't walk around with those credentials, but those credentials and attributes are stored in databases, in government databases, and those are the databases that actually create legal consequences, for example. So to put it in a simple way, for example, when you go to a job interview and you are asked to present your university diploma, for example, that you actually have a medical education, then what very often happens is that people send their medical diplomas, the scans or whatever, or the number of the diploma, and the employer checks against the state information system whether we have an education information system, whether a diploma with that last name and that number exists. So and that is what can be legally relied on, and that is basically what you cannot forge. So we have talked with the Commission about that thing too, and we are looking forward to any kind of cooperation, for example, to make it work with different state information systems across Europe. For example, the wallet doesn't have to be like a bank vault where you store your documents. It can actually also function as a data exchange layer, which basically, when you go and use a service and the service requests some kind of information, for example, your university diploma, then the wallet will actually bring that information from the state information system, not from the wallet itself. So that's one possibility as well.
But another possibility would be to decentralize the information in hand, because I have this information. I have my university certificate. I just can upload them on the system using a blockchain, for example, and sending to you. And it will be validate, safe, secure, and private. So it will be in win-win, and this can unlock at the end of the day the problem of centralized database in the end of the state, which is sometimes efficient, but sometimes also inefficient. And Ronnie, you work at the European Commission. What bottleneck did you identify to justify an update of the eIDAS regulation, and how can we overcome them?
So the main bottleneck was cross-border interoperability. So to kind of use strong words here, you can say that doesn't work today. If you look at the actual number of cross-border usage and cross-border real recognition where you can do something, the numbers are decimal, very, very poor. So the old thinking of this federation of different schemes from A to B and Z does not work, and it will not get traction soon. So that's the reason why we are doing harmonization. And that's not something strange or weird. It's just the same as you do with a passport. So the states issue a passport, but the passport must look in a way, and it must behave in a certain way. So we are doing the same thing for electronic identities. The states will still issue it, but they are giving rules for how this electronic identity must behave and must look. So that is to capture the cross-border effect there. The second thing is, as was mentioned from the Baltics there, we have exactly the same solutions in Norway, but that only works in country. It's inconceivable to have this working across Europe with access to any government register anywhere. So that's why we did decentralization, but not to the blockchain, but saying that you can have your diploma in your wallet. you can present your diploma from the wallet. It will be reliable and it will be secure. And if there's some forgery or something like that, it will be revoked. So we are doing decentralization, and because that's the only thing that can work cross-border. Any centralized solution or semi-centralized solution is not going to work cross-border.
And so, in this particular area, we know from experience that the state want to have a control about that. They love centralization. They like having the idea to control digital identity a little bit for X reason. Perhaps this is to avoid fake identity or to avoid identity thief, or for privacy or national security reason. Anyway, the reason all these news framework differ from the original framework on the eIDAS directive. So you give an insight here, but why the digital identity wallet will be much more efficient than the current framework, which a digital identity in every member state? And is it an acceptable solution for member states that release digital identity? And second question here is what is, in that case, the role of the private and the public sector? You can answer both. And
So it's no question the state is the ultimate source of trust when it comes to a legal identity. So that's why the state is going to be the one that issue a credential saying that I am me and you are you and Sten is him. So that's a government responsibility. When it comes to actually providing a wallet, so the state will be responsible to see that a wallet exists in their home state. There's nobody saying that they have to make it themselves. It will be up to the state to actually do that by their own resources or use private sector resources for doing that. And going beyond this, we have the ecosystem of attested credentials, which is open for everybody. So anybody who can, not anybody, you need to satisfy the requirements, etc. But a credit rating agency or a university or basically anybody can attest credentials and provide them to the wallet. Just like you do today when you do a credit rating of a person, for instance. Land registries, yeah.
And the wallet can be also private, so the state will not be the only provider of the wallet, because we know that some online provider, such as Apple or Google, are already providing a kind of wallet here. So
so what we're saying is that there are rules and regulations for providing a wallet, and a lot of that has to do with privacy, extreme privacy, to be quite frank. And we are mandating the national states to ensure that there is a wallet available in their home country. But we're not telling them how to do this. If they make an agreement with some private company, which might also be Apple or Google, and they follow the rules and regulations and prove that they do that, there's no reason why they couldn't make an agreement with those actors. So we are doing what we're supposed to do. We are giving the policy goals and giving the rules regarding privacy and usage, but we're not prescribing who should issue these wallets. We are saying that identity credential has to be issued by the state, but that's not the same as the wallet.
And Stan, perhaps a follow-up for you, because you work hard to develop digital identity in Estonia since more than 20 years right now. And do you think that digital identity will disappear if there is a wallet, or the wallet will work with digital identity here?
So just to reflect, I think it's a very healthy attitude to ask from the member states to ensure that the wallet or any other digital identity means exists, because private sector market players are very often even more proactive than the state, right? The government. I believe that's the experience all over Europe and the world. And even today, in several countries, including Estonia, we also have private sector parties who offer digital identities that rely on national identity documents, of course, because those are, as Ronnie said, the sources of the ultimate trust. But they are separate eID systems. They are widely used. One of those systems is even more widely used than most of our national eID systems, and that's totally fine. And it's used for both identification as well as giving digital signatures, for example. And to see that the digital wallet is going to follow those same principles, which basically means including the private sector, is very good news, and we definitely welcome that.
I remember someone say one day, Amazon is a company that helped to build a single market in Europe.
But just to clarify, so the member states are free to use private sector entities, but it's up to the member states.
And do you think that private sector can unlock the problem of interoperability here?
So the interoperability is going to be something you have to certify for. Just like if you issue a passport, you can't just do that. You need to ensure that it works according to the standards. So anybody who wish to have a wallet in, first of all, need an agreement with the member state. Secondly, they have to pass certification and interoperability tests before they are able to launch it in the market.
So it's a long process, but we understand the logic of the process. So we have the government that is the ultimate source of trust for digital identity. So to prove that you are what you are. For example, Christophe Gerty, I am Christophe Gerty, based on an information against a database. Then they can build and rely on public or private companies to build digital identity mean. So it can be, for example, a wallet, but also can be a digital identity, such as your mobile identity. I know in Estonian you can use your mobile to identificate and to authentication too. So that is much more efficient than some government solution here. You mentioned one of them. Perhaps can you give an illustration about this mean in Estonia, Stan? Why the one from the private sector, you said that is much more used than the one offered by the public sector. What is the difference, and simply why is better?
Yeah, so I represent the government, so it's really difficult for me to say it's better. but
you understand what I meant.
But yeah, of course, I'm just kidding. And yeah, full disclosure. For example, I have both the government eID means on my phone as well as the private sector one, and it's let's say it's perhaps a bit more modern, can I say, because the government one relies on the SIM card, the secure element, but the private sector one is basically an application, and the private key is not stored on the device, but it's mostly because of the user experience. It's just a bit more convenient. It's just a bit more faster, and it's really easy to create an account. If you have your ID card at hand, you can do it on your phone basically in a minute, and the user experience is what matters. It's somewhat more difficult to basically create an account for the government backed mobile ID solution. You have to get a new SIM card, etc. So that's where it comes into play, and that's how the private sector solution has won the market in recent years, quite remarkably, and there's nothing wrong with that, basically.
You can do exactly the same things which the public and the private use at the end of the day. as the two have to respond to the same regulation and to the same privacy and security regulations and the public and private sectors, basically.
Sure. So our approach is that our government's approach is that we will always have two government issued eID systems available. Currently, those are the one based on the ID card and the mobile ID. Just because of the fact that if for some reason the private sector market player decides to leave the market or something like that, gets acquired by a bigger company and leaves our market, then we will have to be sure that we still have an eID system on the market and a backup for that. So basically, let's imagine that we have two eID systems available on the market, which are widely used. For example, people use their log on to their bank accounts daily with both of those eID systems. If one of them fails for some reason, technical error, whatever, then you can still use the other one. But we cannot allow for a situation where there is no alternative, basically. So that's why we have two government-backed systems, and in addition to the private sector one, and we see interest in clusters of entrepreneurs that there will be more. There will be very interesting biometric solutions coming along very soon, and that's why perhaps I said it's just the beginning. Yeah, there will be very, very cool things coming in the field of identification very soon.
That is interesting. We'll move to the third part. Just a reminder for the audiences, if you want to ask a question, please do it via Slido. We'll do a Q&A in 10-15 minutes. So the third part is about digital identity framework in Europe and abroad. So perhaps René, you work on the file, so you know it's good to have a cross-border digital identity within Europe. So it's already a big deal to achieve this, and that is an impressive effort. But the question is how the framework will work also outside the European Union. This is important because, you know, if I want to move, for example, from Europe to the US, can I use it? Or if I want to go in China or anyone else in the world, it would be good also just to use my digital ID in the same way than in Europe.
Yeah, so that would be kind of a question of mutual recognition. And it's basically the same with your passport today. There's a mutual recognition from the US to Europe and vice versa on that type of documents. So it's very hard to foresee if we are going to get mutual recognition going outside of Europe. There's no reason why so shouldn't happen, because these are open standards. They are available for verification for anybody. But first of all, most importantly, I think mutual recognition is a question about politics, right? So I don't know if that's coming or where it's coming.
And do you think that perhaps Stan and René, you can answer this question, but do you think that there will be restrictions such as, can be legal restrictions such as data protection regulation or technical restrictions such as interoperability issue, which cross-border digital identity?
So there might be things like that. But then again, if you use your passport, you have to show that to the Chinese government anyway. So not necessarily. So we don't know at this point in time if there's going to be some kind of mutual recognition going beyond Europe, because that would also imply that the privacy rules will have to be respected by those states that we actually work with. So It's an open question. I really can't answer it at this point.
Oh, this is totally fine. Stan, in your experience in Estonia, have you tried to develop the Estonia digital identity outside Europe to make them interoperable with other non-EU country?
No, we don't have good examples of outside of Europe, to my knowledge. No, not really, because you have to. My opinion is you have to put most of your energy where most of the use cases are, and most of the use cases are in Europe, and most of the use cases are actually, well, when you look at people who, let's say, live in one country, work in another. Live in one country, study in another, conduct business in several member states. That's where most of the use cases are. But yeah, outside of Europe, currently can't say.
Because read that thanks to digital identity, you can, for example, open a bank account in another member state very easily. So basically, thanks to digital identity, you can open competition worldwide and not having geographic barrier to that. So it can be another solution to unlock value creation or economic value here. If just because there's a legal restriction here, and or just thanks to digital identity, you need that itself, it's interoperable. I can open a bank account, for example, in Estonia, because I can show that my digital identity is accessible to and recognized to Estonia government. I can open a bank account in Estonia, and Estonia is cheaper, for example, than France bank. This will bring economic value, and this will also open the market for Estonian bank.
So if I may add, this is why cross-border is so important, right? This is all about the internal market in Europe, and ensuring that the digital internal market actually works also.
So it's not only consumer benefit, but it's also business benefit to open the market here.
So it's both ways, right? So as a consumer, you are able to choose from all of Europe for the best offer of your services. And for a business, that means that you are able to make your offerings all over Europe. So it's not exclusively a benefit to the business or the consumer. It's supposed to work both ways.
Okay, that is perfect. I will start the Q&A right now because we have 15 minutes left.
Just a second, Christoph, if I may add one thing.
Of course.
Regarding the last question, I believe that it should be, when we talk about recognizing, solutions, digital identity solutions from outside of the EU, I think it should be a pan-European approach, because the digital single market also means that you will be treated the same way in all member states. So, for example, it would create kind of a discrepancy where we would have someone from a third country coming with a digital identity solution from the same third country, and if you imagine someone in Estonia said, yeah, that's perfectly fine, but when they go to I don't know, Finland says perhaps, yeah, that's fine too, but when they go to Germany, then suddenly it's not fine. So that's why I think it should be a pan-European approach when it comes to recognizing digital identity systems from third countries.
And do you think that member states will achieve this solution quickly and in an efficient way, or they will try to battle to have the power in a sort of way?
Well, that's why we have to agree on standards, and basically we have to have a very good set of rules to which these digital identities have to comply with, and they have to be basically the same rules that we set for ourselves. And
I think also this kind of depends on the country, right? So I can imagine, for instance, a country like Canada could potentially be easy in brackets. Other countries that does not have the same values that we have, it might be much harder. So I think it very much depends on which countries you're talking about, because third-party countries is a big box with a lot of things in it.
Cultural difference, regulations are different, and approach regarding privacy or national security are very different. So I know it's complicated to answer this question, but it's good that we have a debate here on how we can, from start, from the design of the digital identity framework, how can we work with third country to offer more value here. So I will open the floor to Q&A. So please, the audiences, don't hesitate to ask questions to the speakers. I'm here for you, and also here for you, obviously. And it's interactive, so no question is irrelevant. So you will be able to have a great answer, I'm sure.
So I see one question for me regarding interested parties in the slider. And so what's going to happen in the coming month is that there going to be an announcement for a private sector expert group to participate in the work. So that will be the way private sector interested party can have an influence in the work that we're doing at the moment.
Okay. I have another questions. Perhaps, is there a possibility for the credit bureau to act as a provider of digital identity? But I'm not sure this is for Europe. Yeah, this is a good question. Can pan-EU digital identity improve payment in Europe? And do you think it could challenge the monopoly of big tech that are developing in digital payment?
Yeah, I can say that conceiving a wallet without payment instrument in it is kind of strange. So yes, that would be something that is evaluated and might be in the pipeline.
Okay, and perhaps then I have a question for you. Is it storing sensitive ID document on the phone doesn't create many potential, risk for data leaks here? And why not connect to master data to pull data on demand?
So one of the reasons why that's not happening is due to privacy. So if you do that on demand, the mere fact that we need it will be known by, for instance, the state. So the way we are constructing this is that you share your information, and nobody except you and the party you share it with will know that this has happened. So this is to avoid tracking and big brother stuff going on. Regarding data leaks, well, that's why we are making stringent standards and certification of the wallets to avoid that happening. So yes, we will make the most effort to ensure that that can't happen.
So there will no possible. So by tracking, what do you mean? That I will be able, me as a consumer or user of the digital identity wallet, I will be able to know which provider is using my data for which purposes and for how long?
Yeah, for instance, if you do an identification at Facebook and that fact is known by the government because you get data on demand, that will make an option for the state to actually track what you are doing. If the state has no way of knowing that you actually authenticated yourself towards a party, then that limits the state's possibility to track you and increases the user's privacy. So this is a key design goal in what we have made in the regulation.
Okay. Stan, question for you. How do you overcome increasing I'm sorry, the question, how do you overcome increasing resistance to the EU extraterritorial regulation and large fine in implementing eID?
Right. So I'm reading the question once more to understand it correctly. How do we overcome increasing resistance to the EU's extraterritorial regulations and large fines in implementing eIDs? Mm-hmm.
It's not an easy question. I totally agree with you.
Yeah, I'm not sure what you mean here. I know what you may mean about extraterritorial regulations, but currently the eID is not meant to be an extraterritorial system. So perhaps you could rephrase the question for us to answer it more specifically.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure it will do. I have. Let's move on to another question from the audiences. It's a question for you, Renee. How can an interested party be involved in the technical work that is beginning here?
Yeah, I'll answer that in the beginning. So there will be a call for expert from the private sector that is coming probably next month. And then the interested party can apply to be involved in this as you experts to have their say on what we're doing.
Perfect. Thank you for the clarification. Another question from the audience is: an EU digital identity can be used as an authentication method, example online alcohol store, buying drugs. Is EU principally against tracking people this way? So, namely that when I would use my digital identity to buy two things, for example, drug, beer, can the government track me or not?
No, they cannot. The only party that knows this has happened is you and the relying party, that would be the pharmacy. So unless the pharmacy is required by law to report to the government, there's no tracking here. And if the pharmacy is required to report, that will be independent on the way you actually get and pay for the drugs.
So there would be no way at the end of the day that one day, technically I'm saying, because this, I'm not speaking only in terms of tax regulations I can change, but technically that the government will be able to track what I'm doing with my digital identity, for example, for tomorrow doing a credit store like in China.
No, so that's one of the very clear things in the regulation, that we are making that technically impossible. We are not only doing it by governance, but we are making it technically impossible. And that will be part of the certification to see that they adhere to these rules.
Okay, and perhaps a follow-up to this question, will the public trust this idea more than a federated Facebook identifier? So basically the question is, why is a digital identity wallet or another digital identity mean would be we trust more this identity than the one provided by Facebook or Google?
So I think I will answer that in a way that you have companies that have their very clear business model, selling everything they know about you. That's the business model. And that applies to Google and Facebook. And on the other hand, you have what we are doing, where we are making the utmost to ensure that there are no information to sell, that we are not able to track you. So then it will be up to you who you want to trust. The party that has a clear intention of selling your data, or the party that are doing everything to prevent that even being possible.
Okay, that is smart, and I'm sure tools provider will try to compete by making the system more private, and at least they will compete perhaps over privacy in that way. Will the ID ever used to authenticate a person to the internet? Seems that would eliminate a lot of fraud activity. Yeah, this is because the ID can also be used for businesses. So, and this is in relation, I guess, to identity thief. So in that case, if we have a digital identity, can we eliminate completely the risk of identity thief? And the risk also of fraudulent activity from fraudulent businesses, for example.
So we have some experience on this already from the developed markets in the Scandics and the Baltics. And what we know is that there still will be fraud, but the one that will be defrauding you will be your wife, your ex-wife, your child, or your ex-girlfriend. So what we call fraud in close relationships. So there's no way on earth any technical solution can prevent that. So if you're thinking about some mysterious hacker group defrauding you, that's not what's going to happen. So if somebody steals your money, it will be those that are close to you.
Stan, do you have some experience also in Estonia about that? Stan, you are on mute.
Yeah, sorry about that. The thing is that you can never eliminate the risks of anyone abusing these systems, but what we have seen and what's going to be relevant with this wallet as well is going to basically be how the person using the wallet is going to keep that data. For example, it's the same thing with the the ID card and the respective PIN codes. If someone else is going to have access to that phone, it's not going to be as safe as it's going to be meant. So there are ways to, of course, reduce the risks, different security layers, but at the end of the day, it's always the user plays a huge role on how safe the solution really is. So we have invested a lot of resources into educating people regarding that here in Estonia in so-called cyber hygiene, and that's going to increase when these new solutions enter the market.
So again, the one having access to your card and your PIN is not going to be a hacker in China. It's going to be either your children or your grandchildren or your wife or your ex-wife.
Exactly. Yeah.
So
and that's just one point, and that's something that people often forget. They're thinking about troll factories and international groups of criminals, but they may forget that they're carrying both their their ID card and a post-it note with the PIN codes in their wallet. So yeah, that works.
No, you're totally right to do reminder about that, because sometimes closest things that we hold on us, it's accessible to the close family, and we should also be careful on that. So perhaps we close the event soon. If you have a last comment, please feel free to add a short sentences of 30 seconds as a final word, if you want.
Right. So, yeah, I would just like to thank you, Christoph, for organizing this event as well as your team. Thanks to Ronnie and everyone who were listening as well. And I'm very much looking forward to working with other member states and the Commission to make this European digital identity wallet work, and make it work in the time frame, the very ambitious time frame that has been set forth. So yeah, thank you from my behalf.
You're welcome, and thank you for your participation. Ronnie?
No, I don't have anything particular to add. So it's been very interesting and very useful, and I hope we provided value to the audience.
Okay, perfect. So thank you everyone for your participation, and we welcome Stan and Ronnie for being there with us. We apologize again for the other speaker. They apologize not to be there. And please, audience, if you want to follow your work, you can follow your work on the Center for Data Innovation account on Twitter, on Facebook, or other channels such as LinkedIn, and even TikTok. Yeah, it's very popular right now. So thank you so much for your time, and that's it. Thank you.